Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, the war of words heats up in the impeachment inquiry of President Trump. Is it time for the president to address the nation to tell his side of the story, and should his whistleblower testify publicly before this goes any farther? Former Saginaw Mayor and Loster Group Consulting President Gary Loster is here to break it all down for us. Plus, Gary and I will also talk about the Raise the Age legislation that could give a second chance to younger felons who otherwise might spend a life behind bars in adult prisons. And that's not all. It's election night. Carol Heron from the Voters Not Politicians group is also here to talk about how you can apply to be part of the state's first ever Citizens Redistricting Commission to redraw Michigan's voting district boundaries. That's the result of our statewide vote last fall to end partisan gerrymandering. But first, we have a follow-up to last week's show when we talked about the impact of political ads on social media, ads that in many cases were misleading or downright false altogether. This week, Twitter decided to ban all political ads while Facebook decided to stay the course. Facebook said it will not only continue the political ads, but get this, saying it wouldn't fact-check the ads either. Given the fact political campaigns will spend $2.5 billion on digital campaign ads in 2020, Facebook stands to gain big bucks but could fall out of favor in public opinion. As you may recall, Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election weaponized social media sites by buying ads and trying to divide the electorate by promoting Donald Trump. So what do you think about that? We would like to hear from you and feature your comments on next week's show. You can do that right here in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can dial into our follow-up hotline, and if you'd like to see any of our past shows, just log on to deltabroadcasting.org. As promised, Gary Loster is here. Thanks for coming in. We're going to kick around a few issues. The impeachment inquiry. I don't think it matters which side you're on, Democrat, Republican, or whether you think the president should be impeached or not impeached. The issue I think a lot of people have is this process seems a bit flawed, right? Don't seem to be a lot of set standards. You kind of do it the way you want. Testimony sort of taking behind closed doors, not a lot of transparency. So I'll just stop right there. What do you think of sort of the process the way it is?
The process and what I had a chance to observe, Mike, is in fact, I believe, flawed. Because the most important thing to me is transparency, that the people understand and know exactly what's going on. And for lack of a better understanding is to be able to say, here's the situation, here's who involved, here's what's happening, and we can all see it for ourselves. It's easy to do with closed doors, but I'm concerned about full transparency, being able to see for myself and hear the facts as they're presented, and by the witnesses as they're testifying. Because I think that the American people are smart enough to determine on their own fact from fiction.
Right, and eventually they're going to be doing some public hearings. That's yet to be seen. It was the same process they used with President Clinton, so both sides are getting hit on this. I think what we're hearing sort of in middle America, including right in her own backyard, is that while they're going through this process, we're not getting a whole lot of work done. And I think in the Beltway, that's fine. But here in middle America, I think some of us are a little bit tired of this process.
I couldn't agree more, Mike, because what's happening is the country, I think, has come to a standstill. We're not, as you said, where we should be. Because I think, by and large, most of the Americans in the country today want to get on with the business. We want to talk about health care. We want to talk about employment. We want to talk about infrastructure. And we're not seeing that take place today because we're caught up in the impeachment process. So what we need to do is get on with the business of running this great country.
Right, and not that the president gets a pass, but we've got to do it differently.
Yes.
Speaking of the president and this inquiry, some have said he's thinking about doing what we would call a fireside chat, to come out and address the nation, tell his side of the story, try to have a little transparency. Back in the FDR days, that's what he called it, fireside chat. We had the great communicator, President Reagan, would do that from time to time. So do you think that would be effective for President Trump to do that?
I think it would do a couple of things. Number one, the information as we heard, whether it would clear that up, I'm not sure. Right. I'm not exactly sure that the document that he may be reading from is factual or not, or it's been changed. I think, number two, if he comes out, given the fact that there's a credibility issue with him already,
Right.
that may not be the wisest thing to do. I think if it was a third party involved, that may be more simplistic, it may be more creditable if it was someone else who did that. The information about it's out there, read the transcript, well, how do we know it's not been doctored?
Good point.
So
Right.
that's an issue that's before the people, and I saw the other night where read the transcript. Well, the transcript, as far as I know, is out on the internet right now. The issue remains whether it's Republican, Democrat, or independent, if it's factual or not.
Right.
That's the key, I think, that everyone wants to know.
Yeah, and he has a different way of communicating with Twitter and through social media. So
Absolutely.
you're right, maybe that wouldn't be a good thing for him to do that.
Absolutely.
Let's change gears a little
Okay.
bit. Let's talk about this raise the age legislation. Essentially, it would raise the age from 17 to 18, where teens could automatically be charged as adults. Michigan is one of only 4 states that hasn't done this just yet. You have a lot of experience in this area, Youth Development Corporation Academy. So do you think this is a good way to go, kind of give these sort of young felons a second chance, I guess, depending on the case, right?
I would handle it on a case-by-case basis because a number of juveniles, as you know, may or may not have been involved in a serious crime. But I do believe that young people have or should have an opportunity to change their lives. 17 is just entirely too young because if, in fact, you place them in the system, the adult penal system, then they're going to come out worse than when they went in because adult prisons is not for everyone. And 17 years old, there's still an immaturity rate as it is. So I believe that if it is raised to 18, I think Michigan, Georgia, Texas, and Wisconsin are the 4 states. But give them an opportunity, give them a chance based on the individual case, based on what that young person has been involved in. So I think it is worth taking a look at. I think it's worth doing something for the young people who are 17 and giving them a second chance.
Yeah, and this is a bill that's going through the State House right now. It has not been approved, but it looks like it has a good chance to do that. If it is passed, it looks like it says prosecutors still have some discretion on transferring 17-year-olds into an adult system on a case-by-case basis, depending on the seriousness of the crime. And I think that would sort of calm the fears of some of the hardliners out there would say, listen, these are young felons, they know better. You know, the punishment fits the crime, and, you know, lock them up and throw away the key. It's a bit too severe on every single case, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I think except for the grace of God, there go I.
Right.
I think it's easier to sit back and judge until you walked a mile in my shoes. I'm not saying that every young person is all of that. I'm simply saying that we need to give them a chance. But again, as you've indicated, the prosecutor has discretion, but the number of organizations which have lined up behind this and want to see this bill passed. But there are some limitations to it, and it should be. We need to have clarity of purpose. We need to understand exactly what it will entail. But again, with the prosecutors having the discretion, and on a case-by-case basis, I think it gets us where we need to be. And when you look at it, it's certainly going to reduce costs to some degree because adding a 17-year-old to an adult penal system is going to cost much more than it is to house them in the juvenile system. Plus, they'll have counseling, they'll have someone working with them, as opposed to the adult system that they would enter into.
You make a good case. It looks like it's going in that direction, so good feedback from you on that. So
Thanks,
stick
Mike.
around. You're going to join us for our
Okay.
second segment as well. Speaking of that, up next, you have the opportunity to be part of the state's first ever Citizens Redistricting Commission to redraw congressional districts and other voting district boundaries. It's the result of your vote last November to end partisan gerrymandering. But will it really do that? Find out next. But first, we would like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here on The Follow-Up. Here's how you can do that. Join our conversation by visiting our website at deltabroadcasting.org/thefollowup, or hit me up on social media via Facebook and Twitter. Go to facebook.com/QTVFollowup and on Twitter at QTVFollowup. And that's not all. Drop us an email at thefollowup@delta.edu, or you can record a comment or question on our follow-up hotline for next week's show. That's 1-877-430-8989. So join the conversation at The Follow-Up. We really want to hear from you. Welcome back to the follow-up. Now, last November, if you recall, Michigan voters said yes to Proposal 2, ending partisan gerrymandering, essentially allowing citizens to redraw our voting district boundaries every 10 years and not politicians. So how do you apply for this first ever 13-member citizen redistricting commission? Carol Heron knows all about that. She is with the Voters Not Politician group that led the charge at the ballot box last fall. Congratulations on that victory a year ago.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for having me.
You bet. A lot of work involved. So this is really an historic time in Michigan with what we're doing. Citizens will be in charge of redrawing our voting district boundaries for the first time ever. So before we sort of get in the nuts and bolts of the process in selecting this 13-member redistricting commission, give us a little history here in terms of help us better understand why the system that we had before didn't working, and it's high time that the citizens now take care of this.
Well, there are a number of reasons that it wasn't working. One was there was no transparency. Another was that it actually really did, by gerrymandering, rig the system so that the average, any citizen's representation, voting representation, wasn't accurate, didn't exist. It just didn't exist. And I heard earlier some talk about whether people have faith in things that are happening or feel like they can be part of the system, and they're losing confidence in it. And a lot of the reason is because the citizens' impact on their representation was dwindling and non-existent. And a lot of that was due to gerrymandering. When gerrymandering happens to the extreme that it has since 2010 especially, then it disenfranchises the voter because the representatives are assured of their election, which means they don't have to listen to their voter. That's the problem.
So Gary, I have to ask you to get you involved in this discussion because you've been in this political game a long time. So does that make sense, and do you see any inherent maybe issues that to challenge some of that, or does that sort of all fit in and make sense?
Well, I think the process makes sense given the fact of where we've come and given the history of gerrymandering in this country. But I would ask Carol, how diverse will the committee be, and how will they select on the diversity in terms of those who will be participants on that committee of 13?
Well, I think that's a fair and an excellent question, and it was one of our largest focuses in writing the amendment because fairness is paramount. We don't want to just change what we have. We want to change it so it solves a problem and just really restores faith that people have in their democracy so that there is representation. There will be an algorithm. The algorithm is meant to represent geographic and the demographics of our state. Now, there are only 13 people on the commission. That's not a whole lot. It is more than other states, some other states have. But how the algorithm will write, I don't know how it will write, but I can tell you the experts who do that it's what they do. And one reason we want to have a robust pool of applicants, at least 10,000, is so that the algorithm has a broad spectrum for all ethnicities, for all ages, for all geographic places in the state, and it can draw from that. And that's how that's going to, the fairness for like certain constituencies, it's going to be through the algorithm that will happen, and also through all the applicants that apply.
Which is the key right now, because just 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of State opened up this application process, right?
Yes.
That you can go online, and you're hoping this pool gets to about, what, 10,000 people. Right now, you've got about 3,000, so.
And more than 10,000 is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
And so, what's involved in that application process? Is it lengthy? Is it extensive? Is it hard to fill out? Is that going to be some of the challenges for people to say, well, I'd like to be part of it, but man, this seems like there's a lot of hoops for me to go through?
I don't think the application has a lot of hoops. The Secretary of State has only just released the application. 3,000 people have applied in 2 weeks. So it can't be that hard because that's happened. But it's going to be direct with the kind of information you would expect, who you are, where you live. There's going to have to be a declaration if a person has party affiliation. They are going to, the only not difficult, but secretarial administrative part that has to be done on every single application, they will have to be notarized. But because that's the only real hurdle in there, but because it is there are free notaries in every county in the state. The Secretary of State has got that in place now. Anybody can go online on the Secretary of State's website or go to votersnotpoliticians.com and it will access the same link and take anyone to a link that will give you a list of every notary in the state that's free that people can go to do this. On top of that, there will be workshops. And the Secretary of State has already begun to have workshops, and Voters Not Politicians will begin having workshops the end of November. And those are to help people who would like someone to help them fill out the application, and there will be notaries at those workshops.
What's the age applicant to apply for that?
Anybody has to be a registered voter, so there will be the same age for registering to vote, which is 18.
Okay, how is it funded, Carol?
Well, which the commission
The
or
commission.
the commission is funded according to the amendment for appropriation from the legislature, and it has to be a quarter of the it has to be a quarter of the was it the last governor's salary?
Okay.
The last governor's salary, I think that's what it was, and it's 25% of that. Yeah, I think that's what it was.
But each of these commission members will get about $40,000, right?
Yes.
Is that the number?
Yes.
For what it will amount to be about a year's worth of work, right?
You know, I've seen,
Yeah.
since we haven't done it,
Yeah.
it's a guess,
Right.
and it depends on how many obstacles happen. But yeah, it'll certainly be a year's worth of work, and it could be 2, and it could be 3. But my guess is it'll be like 19 months or something. It'll be
Yeah,
right
because
in the
I
middle.
think about the process. They have until now and like June 1st to get all the applications in, and then the vetting process begin. And then by this time next year, maybe October, that's when the hard work gets done. They get the census numbers that will be new, right? Start doing their research, and then the following October, which would be of 2021, if I'm doing my math right,
You're right.
is when the maps need to get done, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And October 15th, a year from now, well,
Yeah.
a year from now is 2020, October 15th, they convene. They will have been selected, they'll have gone through the pools all through the summer, and they'll convene then. And then they will begin listening to voters, which means traveling the state. And that is one place that the transparency comes in, because the commissioners, the best recommendation for a person to be a commissioner is, can they listen? Will they talk to people and hear what different communities have to say about what they would like for their district? For example, if a school district doesn't want to be split to be in 2 different voting districts, if it wants to stay together for voting purposes, they can recommend that to happen. But the commissioners have to go around. There will be 10 meetings before they begin to draw the lines to hear what the people in Michigan would like. And anybody in the state can go to those hearings and can have input and can submit their own maps. People can draw up a map and put it forward and ask for it to be considered.
This information that once you have the listening sessions will be presented to who upon completion?
Can you restate?
Sure. Once you do the listening sessions and compile the information, who will that be given to?
Oh, the information, all right, they're going to gather the information, and the commissioners will have it. They're going to use that to draw the lines. They'll use it to draw the lines. I would think that their information will also, it'll be open in hearings. So there could be one hearing in one place, and at the next hearing somewhere else, somebody else may hark back to the first one. And it's not going to be closed off information. It's going to always be open.
But at the state level, who would the final report be presented to? The representatives, the governor? Who will that information finally end up with?
Gosh, I can't remember if the governor has to sign off on this.
But what's interesting about that, since you're on that track, Gary, it's a good question, because as we've talked beforehand, you'll take these 9,000 or 10,000 applicants, they'll get vetted down to 200, and that 200 then goes to the legislature, where you're going to have what? The Senate Majority Leader and the House Minority Leader, 3 or 4 of the those folks that sort of run things in the House and the Senate. They take a look at it, and it's almost like going through a jury pool in a court of law, right? They'll take a look and say, well, I'm going to take a few of these and I'll take, right? How does that work? So in some ways, the politicians do have some say in this process.
The politicians, well, they definitely have skin in the game, but they have some say in this, in that fashion. It'll be the 2 majority and minority leaders, the leader and the vice leader, if it were. So there'll be 4 of them, and they each can strike 5 of the 20 from the applicant pool. And it would be, they would look at, scrutinize all of the names and referrals that people would have in their applications about themselves. And I assume they'll know what they're looking for as to whether or not they want to strike. That part is a little bit like a jury pool, but a jury is compulsory. This is not compulsory.
Right. So what's interesting, so guys like Gary, who've served in the political system as a former mayor, they're out. How do you feel about that?
Well,
You're biased against politicians to join this commission, right?
When were you mayor? When did you?
I left in 2000.
Oh no, you'd be good. It's
be
only
good?
6 years.
Oh, okay.
It's only 6 years
So Carol, I
ago.
can be in your pool, okay.
I hope so. You're needed in that pool.
Okay.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good to know. So
Great,
clarify
yeah.
those. What kind of political experience, I suppose, your background, would they automatically say you're not eligible, right?
It would be any elected official, any party elected official, any employee of, and this is generally put, any employee of the legislature, say, or the Senate, anybody who takes benefit from politics, from partisan politics, or from how the lines are drawn, they would be excluded. And anybody with real deep questions about being part of it can go to Voters Not Politicians, but especially for that question, they might want to go to the Secretary of State, because not only do they have it laid out on their website, they have an email where questions can be sent directly in about this.
Yeah.
So people can make inquiries about this.
We got a few. Go ahead, Gary. What do
So
you
if I go into the Secretary of State, what would I ask them for? An application for the committee, or what would I ask them to do?
What you would, let's say you just go into your Secretary of State's office and you go to the desk, and why are you here? And I'm interested in redistricting. I'd like to be on the commission. I understand the application is out.
Okay.
Can I have an application? People will get in the mail too. 10,000 applications are being mailed. I believe they will be out by the end of this month, maybe December, I'm not sure. But they are forthcoming because the applications are now available. People don't have to wait to see if they, and that's random selection of registered voters. So they don't have to wait. If someone wants to be in it, let's say you want to be in it, do it now.
Right.
Go ahead and do it. And you can do it online. You can, there are various ways you can expedite getting an application, but there will be 10,000 sent in an effort to make sure that people know across the state.
And while we continue our conversation, we have a couple minutes, I want to put up for the viewers some information on how to get this information. We have a website, redistrictingmichigan.org, or you can text Draw the Line to 555-888. So on that website, Carol, is that anything and everything people need to know about the process?
Draw the line to 555-888 is an informational website.
Okay.
So it will have everything about it. We wrote the amendment, we composed it, we circulated the petition, we campaigned for it.
Right.
So it's the horse's mouth. That's where any information can be had. Information or applications directly from Secretary of State
And what we talked
or
about
from our workshops.
a little bit, this was modeled after what California's been doing with great success.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for
some
us,
of it.
we modeled it a little bit off of something.
Yeah, we're not the first.
Right, and there's a learning curve and there's a cost involved. It's going to take some time in this initial pass at it, right? But, I mean, you agree that might take some time, right? Yeah.
I do,
Yeah.
and there is a cost involved. The people that will be giving up what equivalent to a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, anybody who gives up or steps away, really is more correct, from their full-time job to do this, that job will be held. That's in the amendment. It's constitutional. So that'll be held. But they deserve to be paid for their work. We want it to be credible work. But I lost my thought.
That's okay. The one thing I wanted to ask was about a minute ago, really quick. You know, we seem to have gridlock in government at the state level, at the national level. Now you're going to put 13 people in a room, whatever, over several months, sort of equally divided based on their political affiliation. I mean, do you fear at all that they'll have some gridlock as well, or can they get something done? You know?
They're there to get something done.
Yeah.
I believe their motivation is going to be high, the same way the people of Michigan, our motivation to get this done. After being told by many people, you can't do this, we did do it, and we did it first time, and we did it in record time.
Okay.
The people that are on this historic commission are going to want to see this work. So they're going to find out how to work together. They're going to have to come to consensus. And you're right, if these 13 can't come to consensus, how can we
Right.
expect the whole
Okay,
legislature?
you're going to have a former mayor signing up. You might have a broadcaster signing
There
up
you
too.
go.
We'll see.
Mike, well,
I'll be
I want to
honest,
get in the pool.
That's what we need. That is what we need. We need all ages.